السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا منال الدباغ، وأهلا وسهلا في بودكاست لنبدأ الحوار Start the Conversation. الهدف من البودكاست إنه نبدأ الحوار في مواضيع مختلفة ما أخذت حقها في مساحة الحوار أو ما في أحد يبغى يتكلم فيها. المواضيع مختلفة لكن كلها بتدور حول كيف نقدر نعيش بكليتنا مش كأجزاء متفرقة في تناغم مع الناس حواليننا والبيئة. الفضول والشغف هو اللي خلاني أبدأ البودكاست، وهو اللي يدفعني لاختيار المواضيع وضيوف البودكاست. مرة تانية أهلا وسهلا، وإن شاء الله تلاقوا شيء مفيد في الحلقة. وإذا في أي مواضيع تحبوا تسمعوها أو أشخاص تحبوا تسمعوا منهم أتواصلوا معايا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. حلقة اليوم باللغة الإنجليزية. ضيفتي ريتشل بلاكمان، Somatic and Creativity Educator and Coach and Mentor، وFeldenkrais practitioner in training. ريتشل مدربتي والمنتور حقتي حالياً. حبيت أتحاور معها اليوم نتكلم كيف نقدر نرجع لنفسنا، كيف نقدر نفهم أنفسنا الآن في ظل الظروف اللي إحنا عايشينها والعزل الاجتماعي والتوتر اللي حاصل، وكيف يقدر يكون عندنا شوية إبداع وكرياتيفيتي، نلاقي وسائل علشان نرجع نهدأ ونعرف كيف نقدر نقدم أحسن ما عندنا على قد ما نقدر. أتمنى أنه يعجبكم الحوار، وإذا في أي أسئلة ممكن تتواصلوا معايا أو ممكن تتواصلوا مع ريتشل على طول. شكرا. Welcome to another episode of Start the Conversation podcast. لنبدأ الحوار. My guest today is Rachel Blackman, a Somatic and Creativity Educator, Coach and Mentor, Embodiment Trainer, Feldenkrais Practitioner in Training, Senior Teacher at Embodied Facilitator course and the Somatic School, Artist, Actor, Theater Maker, Artistic Director of Still Point Theater. Her new show, You Aren't Doing It Wrong If No One Knows What You Are Doing, and a great mentor of mine and the best body work I've ever got. Rachel, welcome. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Manal. It's so lovely to be here.
Well, let's start with the, it's not an elephant in the room, but how are you doing? And what's your views on the world today? We're recording, it's April 1st, 2020, and we'll see how the world will be when this gets published. Who knows?
Who knows? It is an hour by hour ever-changing reality at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I love about this time, I'm really appreciating about this time, is that when someone asks me how I am, they're really interested. And I noticed that I had to go to the post office yesterday, and everybody wants to know, I want to know how the guy who served me, how his family is. He's interested in how I am and how, there's a wonderful sense of a real desire for connection that is meaningful and has resonance rather than a superficial level of, are you okay? How are you? How are you? Not really interested in the answer, which I think happens in Britain a lot. I'm not sure about Saudi. But.
Well, it's a habit of, how are you? I'm good. And life kind of, thank God, we're good. And you move on. But yeah, I'm finding one of the fascinating things is this need of genuine connection with people.
It feels like the opportunity the virus is presenting us with is one of the opportunities is to inquire into what that is, what it means to be in connection in an era where we're being invited to be physically separate.
Yeah, and we have Zoom and we have the internet, thankfully. I can't imagine how I personally would cope if there wasn't any kind of technological connection that I can see other people and connect with them.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I can't imagine what it was like in the Spanish flu era. Lots of letter writing, I imagine. Letter writing and journaling.
That's true. And that's one of the main reasons I asked you to record this is how is our nervous system reacting to all this, collectively and individually. It's a topic that I've recently been learning more about, and also the term resourcing. I've heard you first talk about that, and I've learned a lot about, taking it slow and rest. And I know I've said a lot of things in these 2 seconds, but let's start with the nervous system. How about that?
That's a great place to start. Yes, it's fascinating being in a place of active attention with how I'm responding on a nervous system level to what's happening in the world. And I'll start by speaking about myself, because that's what I'm with a lot of the time at the moment, because I'm indoors and self-isolating. So one of the first things I noticed in the first weeks of it going into an emergency here in England is this sense of rapidly moving from the macro to the micro, this sense of, oh my God, I need to save the world, but I can't concentrate on my work. Oh my God, I need to save the world, concentrate on like this big scale, tiny scale, big scale, tiny scale, and not being able to do either very well, which is a hyperarousal response. And we recognise it more clearly when it's in relation to something that we can see, or something that's tangible, or something that is more easily recognisable as a threat. But when it's such a global, invisible thing, I think it's harder to clock that it's a hyperarousal response, or to sort of rationalise it or something, or kind of talk to it. To talk to it feels like a slightly less easy thing to do. So I found that I was going, save the world, focus on my emails, this thing, and then having to sleep for 3 hours, which is a collapse, obviously. So this sense of my nervous system having to resource itself and find a counterpoint to that hyperarousal, that place of emergency that's happening inside me.
Yeah, and I was amazed because as soon as schools were shut off and things started here in Saudi changing rapidly, so there was on daily basis more restrictions of movement and more of that, and I felt that in that space of very hyper aroused, tense state where it's really heavy thing that it's on my head, that I could recognize it's not just my own, which was fascinating in the same sense. And I had to bring myself down and focus on not micro, not just maybe even more deeper and smaller than the micro. And, I've turned to Legos to kind of bring me down.
Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I'm really inspired by your Lego practice. Do you remember we had a session and we were talking, you said, I just can't meditate at the moment. I can't meditate.
Yeah.
And you said, but what I can do is Lego.
Yes, it's because I had the first response of, oh my goodness, let's do something for parents who are at home. Let's offer something and let's do, because I can recognize that I can do something. But it was like, no, I don't have the energy. I could barely function with my kids being at home and things have shifting. So, and it just coincided with having received a big Lego, which is the Taj Mahal. And I love building Legos. It's something that I've loved. And I realized that this was very therapeutic because it was very clear instructions, very tangible result.
Yes, so right. There's a beginning and a middle and an end.
Yes. And I could feel my nervous system, coming back to reality.
Baseline.
To baseline. Yeah. And that's one of the things that it's amazing. I would not have thought of Lego as a resource. And I want to kind of expand on this resource idea of maybe first explaining what do we really mean? Because,
great idea.
You know what it is. I know what it is. Maybe listeners wouldn't know what it is. And why do we really need it?
Right. So the idea of resourcing, meaning what is it for you, either externally or internally, that provides you with a way of feeling more capacity inside. so that we're not in reaction. It takes us out of reaction and into a more responsive quality. And a resource might be something that is physical, like it might be like I've just reached for this candle, like lighting a candle, or it could be something that I know works for me, like having a bath, like a thing I can do, or it might be an internal image or a physical process I can do, an experiential process I can take myself through kinesthetically or somatically. In a coaching context, it might be something like remembering a time when I felt more resourced, a time where I felt capable and well. Another thing I'm working with with my mentoring group at the moment is the idea of growing a posse of supporters. So the idea of imagined who would you like in your posse of support? It's an idea that comes from Wendy Palmer. But additionally, it comes from, before that, probably shamanic ideas, the idea that to go on a journey, you need a gang of, a team, if you like, of people on your side, people who've got your back. And these people don't need to be actual people. They could be archetypal beings. They could be gods. They can be superheroes. They can be they don't need to be human. They could be animals. So who do you want on your side? Who would you like to be in your posse? Does the Dalai Lama sit back there somewhere?
In a previous episode, I did an interview with Ched Lee, who's a senior leadership embodiment trainer. She's the head of the Asia LE, and we talked about the posse and what it means of resourcing. And I'm really fascinated to see within myself and all these layers that I've had sort of trained in or kind of come across throughout the last few years, and now being solidified with this new scientific education about how the nervous system works and how we can move from activation to deactivation, and the whole polyvagal theory of relational, and how we can be in a much, I would put it in very simple terms, pleasant and feeling okay about ourselves. Yeah. So that's what resourcing is simply feeling good or better.
Yeah. I really like the word easy. I'm really enjoying the word ease, which I'm borrowing from Feldenkrais. The idea of having the capacity for ease, which doesn't mean effort-free, because, of course, just even standing up or opening the fridge requires some kind of energy expenditure. Mm-hmm. But to do it with as much ease as possible feels like a lovely invitation. And I think that something that Moshe Feldenkrais, who created the Feldenkrais method, and Alexander, who created the Alexander technique, kind of stumbled upon but didn't know, because it predates all the trauma knowledge, trauma recovery knowledge. They stumbled upon the fact that adaptation and healing happens in the rest. If we can bring the being into the rest, digest, restore part of the parasympathetic response, then all sorts of beautiful healing and adaptation and newness can begin to have the space to arrive. And then the polyvagal theory reveals there's this ventral vagal opportunity, this idea that a lot of other cultures have known and practiced intuitively for a long time, and we've somehow in the West have sort of abandoned for some reason, I don't know why, but this idea of sharing dancing and sharing singing and sharing laughter and sharing food and all this stuff that we just know nourishes us so much.
And now we're getting the lesson, because that's what I see people doing. It's sort of like a big lesson, maybe consciously or unconsciously, that we need people. We need, and people are getting really, really creative with this stuff. People watching movies together, playing board games together through, social media and all these stuff, because that's like, we really need that ventral vagal, stimulation with other people. It's no longer enough to just sit and isolate, which is in a interesting way that, if life before the virus was in isolation.
Yeah, that's interesting. So in a way, it's a call to that quest. How do we find connection? There's something about an obstacle that forces us to be creative, isn't there? Mm-hmm. If I'm given a problem, I need to work out, if you think about a natural metaphor, if a plant's trying to work out how to find the sun, it just goes around until it can work out how to face the sun. And that generative, adaptive and creative impulse it's threaded through us because we're biological beings and we're creative in our essence.
And also on the flip side, what I'm finding, some people, they're feeling guilty about going to the fridge or going to self-soothe and find resources that are external that they feel guilty about. So I've read it so many times, like, I don't want to keep eating the chocolate. And with the interactions that I've had with people, I'm saying, it's okay. Because at this survival mode, and please correct me or elaborate if you wish, at this survival mode, we want to bring ourselves back to base to be able to function. And this is not the time to say, oh, okay, I don't want to have the chocolate, I want to go do something else, because that's what our system understands. Some people are going to high intensity exercises to be able to cope. So how do you see this kind of not struggle of some people of wanting to self-soothe yet feeling bad or guilty about their modality or how they are choosing to self-soothe? Maybe it's not really a conscious choice.
Well, we do know that the limbic brain tends to override all the other systems when it's in a state of disease, and that's happening on a personal and epic level at the moment. So there's two levels of that story happening. It's both in the home and all over the world. In fact, I've never known a time for it to be more global, that I can feel into the whole world's response on some level. So I would say that whatever reaction you're having is not inappropriate for the time. In a sense. What I would encourage is the possibility that you might be able to follow the thing that's calling you. So this your impulse to follow the Lego. Mm-hmm. There's something in the Lego that's medicine. You don't know what it is, but something in it, something in it is working for you. You don't know what. All you need to be on your own with the Lego, and everyone else needs to leave the room while you spend some time with the Lego. I'm having a similar thing with plants. So I was in the middle. I was just about to start. I was halfway through making my new show, and it was all set up well. It was all being commissioned. It was all ready to go. Paying a lot of people to support me to make it. And then all of a sudden, within a week, that all fell away completely. And what I experienced, I thought I was going to experience terrible loss, but what I experienced actually was a kind of relief, because suddenly felt like not where my creative attention was required. It didn't feel appropriate anymore to be forcing my creative attention in that direction because something else was being asked of me. And so feeling into how do I be with this? How do I be with this sort of slightly heightened emergency sense every day plus exhaustion. And suddenly it felt like the plants around me, I've always been someone who kills all my house plants. And suddenly all the houseplants they feel like they're talking to me. Now that sounds like a hippie thing to say, doesn't it? But so if the more I can invest in them, they give me, a bit like the Taj Mahal for you, something really simple that gives me this feedback of my effectiveness. I can feel the more time and energy I invest in them, I get this very instant feedback loop of some really basic sense of my value and it being okay. Things are okay on that small level. The small thing, it's something I can do to make something a little bit better. a bit more organised. And so in doing that, something in me comes quiet, and then I've got capacity to pay more attention to the meal I'm cooking, or it's still very basic, simple things. And that I walked for 2 hours yesterday to go and get our groceries because I decided to walk instead of drive. And that opportunity normally isn't available in my life. So we're being presented with this whole new invitation about where we place our attention. And I would say, if you need to eat chocolate for a few days, just go for it. It's not a big picture worry, you know.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying also, when you feel that you're good enough, or to use the term resourced, and you've had that chocolate, and, you know, maybe it's a good time to explore what else would be a good resource. What would make me feel good? Let's experiment and see. And the way I see it, the more variety or choices of resourcing, and, you know, whether external or internal, the more choices that I have and what would work with me right now. Because I would know if going and having a burger is what I really need right now, I'm going to go and have that. But it would be problematic if that's the only thing that I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm very wary of this word should.
Okay.
Because mostly I find that when I use the word should, I'm comparing myself to something externally that depletes my capacity to self-care. So what about, instead of should, we're replacing it with this question, what might I like? What might I like, or what wants to happen is another one, or what is this moment that's happening now? So if I can listen into that, maybe it's about rest, maybe it's about letting my face be in the sun for a bit, maybe it's about slowing down, maybe it's about dancing like a lunatic in my lounge room to really loud rock music for an hour. What wants to happen now is a beautiful invitation, not what should happen, what wants to happen.
I didn't even notice that I said should. Just
I don't mean to correct you. It's not a correction.
No, it's an interesting revelation, because I totally say, no, I should not be doing something because I should do that. But it's interesting how that concept of should is still deeply ingrained in the way I'm processing things. And I'm saying it, and I don't even recognize that I've said should. But yeah, I totally mentally in line with it, but the habit is still there. But what would make me feel good right now? And I want to also expand on the self-care part of it. That sometimes it gets kind of defined in one way, and of course, with how we are, especially. I see it with mothers, that self-care is almost a luxury, that it's done, you know, after you kind of made sure everyone is there, everyone is fed, everyone is taken care of. And then self-care is a luxury, which I don't see it at all. I think it's a necessity almost.
I agree with you, and I also am aware that I'm speaking from a place of the fairly luxurious position of not having children here that I need to be looking after all the time. My stepson, my partner's son, is with his mum because we've both had symptoms. Mine are very mild, but enough to think it's probably better if we just leave him in one of the two households, not both of them. So I really hear you, and I feel like perhaps, I don't know. So what I'm noticing with a lot of clients and friends who are also parents and in lockdown at the moment is that they're exhausted all the time, that they're feeling pressure to homeschool, do all the cooking. Whereas before in the day there might have been a minute or an hour to themselves where they could do a class, or a couple of hours. Now there's none. That's all been taken away, and they get to the end of the day and they just need to collapse because they're so exhausted. And they've got a husband at home. A lot of them, especially if they're more of a full-time mum, they've got a husband who's at home working, actually trying to do a 9 to 5 or a full day of work so it's really tricky, and I know it's not always gendered like that, but for some reason I'm noticing a lot of pressure on mothers in that way in this crisis. And so I guess my question would be, okay, so if you can't have like the full hour of yoga class or the full half an hour of meditation or whatever it is that's your normal resourcing, what would be a lovely thing that you could find for yourself to do following enjoyment that might be 5 minutes of resourcing? What could you do for yourself that might feel like an enjoyable treat? And that might require shutting people out of a room for 5 minutes, or it might require locking a bathroom door for 5 minutes. Seriously.
Yeah, and absolutely. And when I'm trying to communicate personally is the why we need that, why it's not a luxury. Even as a mother myself, when I am feeling resourced and I have the capacity to self-regulate, because my kids are there, they're noticing, they pick up these, cues that we can't hide.
All the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
They are better off. So that's why I say it's a necessity, not a luxury, that if I'm taking care of myself and resourcing myself and self-regulating, I'm helping them as well.
You're helping everyone.
I'm helping everyone. So this is what I tell them, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be 5 minutes, and 2 minutes, can do wonders. If it's done. So this is what I want to really highlight, is the why. I
think there's something about how. Sorry, I spoke over you for a second there.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There's something about how the nervous system works, in the sense that if we're in a state of slight hyperarousal or panic, even if we don't even recognize it, then that emergency mode, that button as a mother, gets pressed a little bit, maybe more intensely than for others, and it feels like a primary need. It feels like the most important thing to do is to make sure everyone's looked after. And I absolutely agree with you that if you're in a place of depletion and you're not in a place of creative resource, then you are of very limited use to the other nervous systems in the room. So how do I be a creatively resourced environment to encourage others around me within my field of influence, which at the moment might only be your home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within my field of influence, how do I be a creative resource to enable other people to regulate their state? So the better I am bringing myself to quiet and adaptability, the more capacity I've got to influence the environment around me. So it's like putting your own airbag on first in the airplane. First of all, start there. That's like your primary. It's my primary responsibility. And the trick, I think, though, is how do we remember that? That's all very well to say.
Yes.
But the struggle to do it requires a monumental sometimes shift. The difference between knowing it's good for you and actually doing it, or setting up some kind of practice. And I guess that's why I like your idea of just 5 minutes. We talk about 5 minutes or a couple of minutes, or just some little demarcated space. Like I loved when you were talking about doing your Lego. You said, actually, my family's I'm not sure they're welcome to this. Of course, my kids want to get involved because it's Lego. But there's something about when you put yourself in that process, even for 5 minutes, then mum has a lot more resources for everybody else. You've got a lot more to give.
Yes, absolutely. And that seems the same idea, the same look with rest and resting. And I still remember during EFC and the retreat, when I purposely decided to miss a session to go take a shower and just kind of chill while missing a session, and you gave me a clap and a congratulations. You took a rest.
I think I call them countercultural naps.
Countercultural naps, yes. And it felt so liberating to do that for me, because rest has been demonized as a laziness, not being productive. It's why do you need to rest? And all these kind of connotations of feeling guilty when I'm doing that. And having had that space of being, applauded to go and rest was an awesome experience. And I truly value that rest is where the learning happens, and where it's not okay. It's absolutely crucial to go and rest. The same with self-care.
Yes, and I think even more so when something like this is happening in the world. That there'll be something in you that really needs more rest, and we're fortunate enough to not be on the front line of healthcare workers and emergency services that can't rest at the moment. We have this luxurious opportunity in our homes to let ourselves just put ourselves down for a while. Put yourself down. Take a moment to put yourself down, and then. It's maybe a little bit less easy to do if you're deep inside symptoms at the moment or feeling ill, but still even more of an opportunity maybe to be as restful and as quiet as possible, as often as possible. We don't get this opportunity much in culture.
Yeah.
When else have we had a chance like this to just be in?
Yeah. The greatest thing you could do, the most contribution to society, is to sit home and watch Netflix.
What? And have a nap on the sofa in the day and go for a stroll in the sun.
Yeah, it's funny that now I have to not have to that I should, but I need to go walk outside in the sun, at least for 5 minutes every day. And I am super grateful that I have this information and this, practices and embodiment of understanding, or sensitivity, actually, of understanding what's going on with my nervous system. And when do I really need to rest and, call it a day? I don't have to get on so many calls, so many activities, and making a choice on where I would want my energy to go.
I love that question. Where is your creative attention? So imagining that the light of your creative attention is a generative force. It grows things. Where you place your attention grows things. So where are you choosing to place your creative attention now? And you've got that choice in any single moment. So if I'm just scrolling through the internet looking at coronavirus statistic updates, which, let me tell you, I did for a few days, that's potentially not the most useful application of my creative attention, potentially, And the invitation that I have that resource to place my attention where I want to, maybe that's the only choice we've got ultimately in some high pressure situations. So what if I'm choosing to place my attention on resting for an hour or two, or even 5 minutes if I don't have space in my day? What might that be like to place my creative attention there? And that what I find works really well for me and some of my clients is that if it's an open question, the light of my imagination wants to move towards it. Something in me moves towards it if it's an open question, whereas if it's a command, something in me moves away.
Go rest right now.
No, do it. It's a job. Do it. Yeah. Where might you like to, is there something in you that might like to come to quiet now? Or what in you, what's fascinating you at the moment? Follow your fascination, follow your curiosity. And it's a different quality of listening to the one that we're most in culture often,
I'm finding it personally great relief to. So I was talking to Philip Shepard yesterday, and he said,
Yes.
He was saying, I find myself accomplishing nothing during the day, and it's like I told him, thank you. That's quite a relief because, and the other day, Michael Pollan, who's a journalist, and he's a professor, and he must be a really busy guy, and I'm sure he has a lot of stuff to do. And he posted a picture of a loaf of bread, and the caption was, "The only thing I accomplished yesterday." And it was that loaf of bread. And I was like, okay, so even the sense of accomplishment is in a way being redefined.
I think so. And it's bringing us back to something essential and closer to our sense of accomplishment is more closely aligned with survival and beingness. And so this thing of really noticing and appreciating and being grateful for the simple act of being able to make a meal with the things in your cupboard, that's a creative project, that's a creative project to find out whether or not you can get eggs today, because it's not a given. We don't know we can. So that my attention's drawn to these details of life that normally I can kind of overlook. I'm being really invited into paying attention and real kind of grateful attention to these details of ordinary life. It feels beautiful.
Yeah, if we go on with the day and we ate, we're breathing, that's an accomplishment of its own, and we need a pat on the back and celebrate that. And also recognizing with this whole thing, my heart really goes out to people in difficult situations, difficult relationships, children who find solace in going to school and being with friends, and now they're asked to be home with abusive parents or really difficult situation of poverty. So that's also brings me to a grateful spot of, if I'm able to take care of my family, resource myself, and help them through their ups and downs of the day, that is great. It's not even good enough. That's the best thing I could do.
At the moment, that is that's being a superhero.
Yes, superhero. Being a superhero. So, the other day I had a list of stuff to do, and one of my kids were kind of not having a great day and bored and didn't know what to do. And he's having a low day like all of us. And he hates shopping. I would drag him to buy stuff. And he said, "Mom, I wish I can go clothes shopping right now." And that's how desperate he was. So at that point, nothing else mattered. And we just sat down, we watched something, we chatted, so things are shifting tremendously of what we need to really be doing.
That brings up a really interesting point that's been with me a little bit around homeschooling, and the thing I'm seeing a lot of parents break their back over regarding trying to keep their kid in some kind of active, engaged school-style system of learning, even though they're at home every day. And a friend of mine's school sent home this beautiful note from a teacher saying, maybe what you have to teach them in this time is not like what they're normally learning at school. Maybe there's a whole lot of other aspects of being that you're able to communicate. Maybe it's about sharing time with them in a way that you don't normally get to share time with them. It's about exploring how you might cook a cake, or how you might grow some things, or what happens when you need to change a tire on a car. There's all sorts of ways in which learning is about life itself rather than the school curriculum. And again, if doing the school curriculum or some kind of version of it to your kids is putting you into a hyper-aroused state, it's a state of dysfunction. It's a state of not doing it well. So what can you do that's within your resource that's about keeping things gently alive, gently opening, little things that have a beginning and a middle and an end and a process?
Yeah.
Not necessarily your maths homework, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. One of my friends, she has a 6-year-old, and we had a chat, and she was like, he does not need homework. And she found herself sitting down to do homework with him. He's got frustrated, she's frustrated, and it's not working. So really, she said, I don't care about it. It's we're not doing this. We're playing, which I think was a really good thing for her to choose to do. And that's for younger ones. My kids are 12 and 14, so I'm happy with having the virtual school still, because it's adding some structure. So during the day they have their tasks and there's things to do. I'm not being overly obsessed about stuff like that. And really, who knows how the world's going to change. I don't think this time will affect their careers and lives for the future. So I'm putting that. One of my kids is really into cooking, and he's, that's great help for me. And I'm encouraging him to find new recipes to explore and be creative with all these things. He's attempting beef Wellington next week.
Good grief. How sophisticated. That's so sophisticated.
Exactly. So we'll see. I'll share with you the results. So yeah, it's this being piece that it's being not forced, for lack of a better word, but kind of right in front of this opportunity is right there. But I am also acknowledging that not a lot of people would see it that way.
Yeah.
At least from what I'm seeing.
Well, I wonder, I think there's a lot of people who are in various aspects of panic for very good reasons, like all sorts of awful stories, people not being able to be with dying relatives because of the isolation and the quarantine thing, people totally panicked about money. I've got plenty of friends who are self-employed who like 90% of their income has dried up overnight. Things like that. People, we're privileged enough to live in cultures where there's very likely to be food on the table most days. We've got room to move so that we're not just crowding in all over the top of each other. My heart goes out to people in countries where to be on lockdown means to be with your whole family in one room. To not leave the house means to starve. There's so many countries in the world where that's a reality. So, yeah, we are relatively incredibly well-resourced, actually. And so what are we going to do with that? How can we be creatively engaged with that?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question to kind of end this. We're getting close to the hour. Any last thoughts or wisdom or jokes or whatever? whatever inspires you creatively to leave listeners with. Actually, I know you said you're not doing that anymore, but your new show.
Oh, yeah.
You're not doing it wrong if no one knows what you're doing. I hope I said it right.
That's that'll do, yeah.
Yeah. What's because I know kind of a bit of the story behind it, but it's such a fun thing to celebrate really now.
Right. That's true, actually. That's a lovely thing to end on. So this invitation that you can't get it right anyway. So perfect. You can't get it perfect. So have a go at something and follow enjoyment and do it with your heart and with an open heart and courage. Make some mistakes with an open heart, and who knows what you might discover. It's really an invitation to get should out of the bloody room with you. Get should out of the room. we're just so driven by that a lot. So what would it be to let should go and play around with what you have? What materials have you got now that allow something to take place that interests you, whether that's your Taj Mahal or your whatever it is, and take the weight off. Be kind to yourself. Don't get it right. Dare to not get it right, because you're not doing it wrong if no one knows what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I love dare to do it, to not do it right. And who knows what's right?
Exactly.
Anyway, and the same with, who knows what's normal anyway. So thank you so much, Rachel. I think this has been delightful. I really hope listeners can find some inspiration, some lightheartedness. That's what I was feeling throughout this conversation. And really an idea of that resourcing and finding pleasure, no matter how small, can have a big impact.
Yeah, thank you so much, Manal, for bringing these subjects up, because I feel like they're so important. They've never been so important, and the more people can hear that message, the more likely it is that they'll be finding little bits of enjoyment in their day. And I'm so grateful for the work you're doing. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.